Well, while I'm up here, my name is Professor Leandra Casson Marshall. I am one of the soon-to-be founders of the Center for Global Africa. So we're really excited about the Center for Global Africa and what all of the opportunities that will be available to students. All of the student exchanges that we're planning for you to go to South Africa, for you to go to places like Ethiopia. So we're really excited about the opportunities that are going to exist for our students to work on all kinds of scholarship opportunities. We're going to do research opportunities. And so it's going to be really exciting for all of us to work together and become a part of the solution in terms of working with the African continent. I don't know if you realize this, but the Chinese are doing work in Africa, Europeans are doing work in Africa, and we have Americans working in Africa. We just want more, particularly African Americans, to be a part of this initiative to help develop the continent of Africa. Now I'm hoping, with no further ado, I will bring you the Sankofa dancers as well as the delegation.
Bonjour, mesdames, messieurs. That's the international language. Whether you know it or not, you guys who haven't taken French, you better take it. And if you don't want to take French, just take Chinese. Ni hao. Everywhere I go, I try to learn at least how to say hello and I'm hungry. Welcome to Delaware State University and to the village of the Sankofa African Dance and Drum Company. We are Sankofa. Anybody here from Ghana? The Ghanaian delegation. We have a word from your country as our name, which is Sankofa, means return to your roots. And all of you represent our forefathers, so we are returning to our roots by trying to imitate the beautiful music and dance of the African people. So tonight we're going to do 3 or 4 numbers. What's the next one? Cuckoo? Anybody ever hear of cuckoo? Now you laugh at it. If you're an American, you laugh at that word because you think it means crazy. But in Swahili, it means chicken. So we're going to do a little chicken dance now. It's called cuckoo. don't speak the same language, but when you play a musical instrument, it speaks the same music. So tonight, we're going to give you a drum piece. It's just, we call it Intermission. All right? Go ahead. This dance company started in 1994. We've been doing this for a pretty long while, since most of the young folks in the rear were born. We welcome our parents and our visitors from the continent. We're so proud you're here at Delaware State University and in Dover. I've been to Africa about 15 times. God knows I love it. I've been to South Africa twice, and I want to go back. It's a long drive, though. it's a long way to get there. You get sleepy over and over and over. But on the British Airways, the food is awfully good. We want to let our visitors from the continent know how much we appreciate the encouragement that we get from you. Now, somebody says, well, you've got some money in the White House. I said, well, don't worry about that. That'll change. That's going to change, and things are going to get better. Somebody said something about the Chinese, Dr. Casson said something about the Chinese and the Egyptians and everybody. Well, not the Egyptians, they're already Africans. But everybody, Europeans are in Africa. Well, we're all in Africa. We're all Africans, so we might as well go on back home and be satisfied. I see people of different skin colors here. You too are African. We're all African. The world is made out of Africans. We're all just part of God's people. And knowingly that Adam and Eve came from Africa. You know, at one time Iran was called East Africa. Did you know that? No, even some of you brilliant people from the continent. Yeah, I mean, East Africa was the Garden of Eden made, and that's where God made Adam and Eve, right? Made them out of the dust of the earth. What color is the dust? What color is the earth? What's our next number? Sunu. Our next number is called Sunu. Sunu most of our dances represent different countries. And hopefully we're going to do a couple more for you. This one is called Sunu, represents Guinea. from the dance, from the drum teacher. The drum teacher is a gentleman in the blue shirt on stage with his 3 sons. And and the young lady, well, you can tell the young lady it's his daughter. So if they all look one way, you know, I said we all look alike. All right. Okay, but we're going to do this. What's it called? New Lumber. New Lumber. This dance is called New Lumber. I will stay up here. It's tired going up and down those stairs. Thank you. I hope we are measuring up somewhat. All right. Thank you. All right. That's his Mike. The number is called Manjani. Manjani is a West African dance. The Maleke people, and it features girls, all girls. We have had young men in our dance company, but right now we're losing they're not participating very much in the dance. We have a couple went off to college. We have 2 or 3 graduating this year. So we're down to a few. Usually we have 8 dancers on stage. We're down to 4. And we're tonight going to do Manjani the best we can. But Manjani is not a difficult dance. It's a competition. Ladies and gentlemen, Manjani.
We're just going to throw another little drum piece in there real quick while they catch their breath. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's I call him the old man because he's very, very young compared to me. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'll be 90 in May. Still pretty good. Can't dance like I used to. Never could drum, but I could cut a rug in my day. But ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do this number. It's called Manjangli.
Yeah.
in Africa. Well, thank you, Doctor.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you give it up for Reuben Salter? There's a story. I went home to Ghana one day, and I walked into a hotel, and guess who was sitting there? Reuben Salters from Dover, Delaware, and I didn't know they were there. So you never know. We'll see you there again soon. Yes. And thank you, Reuben. Okay. And to the Sankofa dance troupe. It's been a very long day, but we did this on purpose because we knew that we only had a couple of days to create the magic of connecting. You know, we've been building bridges across the seas. It began with the bones of our ancestors that perished on the Middle Passage. The bones are connecting. We are, in 2019, attempting to continue that connection in a more positive way. That is what these 2 days have been about. We hope that we've gotten you ready to contribute in any way you can. For our students, we promise that you're going to be involved at every stage, and the majority of you are going to get an opportunity to cross that bridge, to continue to contribute what you can. At this point, everything is almost over. We would like to call upon Ambassador Arikana Quao to give us a few minutes of closing thoughts. After all, she's our representative to the Americas. And once that's over, it's not going to be too long, but once it's over, we're going to retire outside to the foyer and engage in some communicating, informal talking, and networking. Ambassador.
Okay, once again, thank you to the organizers, to the excellencies in the room, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We are coming to the end of what has been an amazing 2 days. And I truly am grateful for the opportunity to come and spend some time with all young people. Like I said earlier today, spending time with you all always knocks a couple of decades of age out of my life. So truly, I am grateful. As I stand here in front of you today, and particularly within an educational environment, I couldn't help but find myself thinking, you know, maybe I should share with you, and some of you may know this story, back in January of, I believe, 2017. I had a visit to the office in Washington, D.C., and I was asked to do a press release about a situation that was taking place at Cornell University. And after listening to the story, I said to whoever was requesting the press release, and I said, what is the press release going to do? I need to go see the children. I don't know, do any of you know the situation between African American students and continental African students at Cornell? Some of you do know about it. What was happening was the African American students were complaining about, were actually protesting about the fact that there were continental African students and Caribbean students at Cornell, and that the university was using their enrollment to fill up the quota for black enrollment. So that was the complaint. So I decided to go visit the children. So I went to Cornell and asked for a town hall. And we had a conversation, and I did ask them 2 questions. I said, if the issue was foreign students, did it occur to you to also complain about the Asian students on campus? And the students looked at me like, what are you talking about? like it was nothing that ever occurred to them. And I said, then if the issue was the enrollment quota, did it occur to you maybe to go to the administration and ask for an increase in the enrollment quota for black students? And again, they just looked at me like, what are you talking about? And then I went on to explain to them that it was easier for you to go after your brother and your sister. It never occurred to you to look anywhere else. So as we are here today, and we are in the year 2019, 400 years since the first documented slaves first landed on the shores of the Americas, we must not forget how we got here. And quite often, we get tangled in our day-to-day lives. We, as your elders, because we know better, we're struggling with how did we get here, and what do we need to do to make sure we clean this up so you young people and your children and generations to come do not have to go through this mental slavery that we are suffering from. The realization that we are suffering from this mental slavery, the shackles of the mind, is a place that we need to begin, because it is absolutely important that you young people understand your world. As an elder, we apologize to you. We are leaving you a world that is not what we found it to be. But as black people, our situations have never been better anyway. Our reality is we were left in the wrong lane, I like to put it. If you look at the legacy of slavery and what we have gone through as a race, any other race would be extinct. And yet still we rise. And because I'm in an educational environment, allow me also to say, our journey begins with slavery, and when slavery ended, they picked up with colonization back on the continent of Africa. And those of you who have not had an opportunity to read up on it, I would like for you to go back to the legacy of colonization, starting with the Berlin Conference. How many of you have read about the Berlin Conference? Good. So too many of you have not read about the Berlin Conference. Well, let me let you why they met. Because if we can answer one question today, especially among you young people, how did we get here as black people? How did we get here as your Africa? You must understand the Berlin Conference. The reason I want to concentrate on the Berlin Conference is quite often we, the black people, are the ones being used to put down our Africa. We're the ones who are now being used as instruments of our own self-destruction. The people who are putting Africa down the most are us black people. But you don't realize at a subconscious level, you are also putting yourself down. Because if you were all of you to work out, black people, they're not gonna see an American from Colorado, or an American from Delaware, or an American from Kenya. They're gonna see a black woman, and they're gonna see a black man. So the sooner we understand how we got here, and the fact that those who put us where we are not going to do anything to get us out, that for us to get out of our doldrums in the world, we, and only we, have to take us out. But for us to be able to take ourselves out, we must first understand, how did we get here? And since you all are the leaders of tomorrow, you must know how we got here. Particularly, you bright minds. We are old, but we got some wisdom. However, I do know that when we take your intelligence, your energy, we couple it up with our wisdom, magic can happen, and we can change course. Particularly in this year, 2019, 400 years later, Berlin Conference, 1885. The colonizers, after having been running around Africa looting from the local people, authorized to do so by their governments. Go take as much as you want. Everything in it is yours, including the people, if you wish. Pretty soon they started fighting each other over who has stolen what from who. So the then Chancellor of Germany, Bismarck, fearing there was going to be a European war on the African soil, decided to call his sidekick, King Leopold of Belgium. That was November of 1884. He said, let's meet in Berlin, Germany. Let's organize ourselves so we can effectively loot from the monkeys, they called us. So they met in Berlin, I repeat, to organize themselves so they can effectively loot from the African monkeys. So history tells us that they sat around a great big old table with a big map of Africa across the table, and they proceeded to chop up Africa into the tiny economies that we know today. It was all done in a way that would bring about maximum destruction to people who were once the same. The larger the kingdom was, the more countries that got out of it. The more the kingdoms got together, that got along, the more countries got out of them. Make sure you divide them into tiny little pieces so they'll never get along. If kingdoms were fighting each other, they let them stay so they can keep fighting. History tells us that a husband and wife went to bed in Zambia. When they woke up in the morning, the wife was in Malawi and the husband was in Zambia. The divisions were so arbitrary, but it was all about bringing maximum destruction. It was not bad enough that they were dividing us up. They also decided then in the end, they gave the countries to different countries with different languages. So pretend you're driving from Zambia. You're speaking English. Pretty soon you're in Angola. You're speaking Portuguese. From there you are in DRC. You're speaking French. Go to the east, you're in Equatorial Guinea. You're speaking Spanish. Go a little further north, you're in Cameroon. Back to French. Same Cameroon up north, English. Are you with me? All by design. Furthermore, they set out a system to let the Africans believe everything African was bad and everything European was better and more desirable. The rule of divide and conquer was established and the seed was sown. That was 135 years ago. Fast forward. A system that was put in place to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. I repeat, a system that was put in place to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated 135 years ago remains in place today. I often say if this world was a boxing game, you see, even in boxing, they realize that the heavyweights belong to the heavyweight boxing ring. The lightweight, the middleweight, and they want to be somewhere out here. You don't take a lightweight boxer and throw them in the heavyweight boxing ring. But when they established the African countries that they established, they gave them the same sovereignty as the big nations. So we have Djibouti, we have Burundi, We have Eswatini. We have Lesotho, Togo, Equatorial Guinea, Central African Republic, Gambia, as a matter of fact, all the African countries. Gabon is 1.5 million people. It's a country. You know, Gabon with 1.5 million people, it has the same sovereignty as India, as China, as the US. And when it comes to negotiating, as the European Union. So countries, please stand up. Little Djibouti gets up. And right next to Djibouti is China. So may the game begin. Are you with me? Do you see how African countries are not even lightweight boxers? They're wannabe boxers who are being thrown into the heavyweight boxing ring with heavyweight boxers, and they're getting their rear ends kicked day in and day out. And when Djibouti loses against China, the world sits back and says, what's wrong with you, Djibouti? Why aren't you taking care of your people? Are you with me? This is our reality in Africa today. So whatever happens, you must realize that Africa is a sinking ship. Whatever wins you might have while you are in a sinking ship, they are minor wins because this ship is going down. The sooner we, black people, realize that we were set up to lose. Africa was, through the Berlin Conference, Africa was put in the losing lane. And until we undo the damage done by the Berlin Conference, nothing that we do is going to give us the sustainability that we need. The sustainability that Africa needs in order to move itself forward. You see, if the colonizers had done 5 things: access to water, access to electricity, good roads, good healthcare system, and good educational system. If they had just done those 5, Africa would be in a very different place today. But the whole idea was not to develop Africa. Their premise was to underdevelop Africa for their benefit. You see, a stable African country is an African country that cannot be exploited. So therefore, they set out to make sure that African countries are never stable. They used to do coups. Now they don't do coups anymore. Over 64 coups took place in Africa. None of them, I repeat, none were of African origin. All of them orchestrated, 7 of them because the leaders wanted to pull away from France. How dare you try to be too smart? We'll just have a coup in your country and get rid of you. And the others were mercenaries who were going around creating coups in Africa, and every time it was because a country would have discovered a natural resource. So while they throw the country into a civil war, they'll be busy siphoning the natural resource. And the world will just keep on saying, oh, look at those African countries. Always fighting, at war with themselves, with wars that were manufactured for us. Such is the status of affairs with our Africa. Then they followed up with continual demonization of the continent. There's a lot going on in Africa today. A lot of good news out of Africa today. 6 of the top 10 fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. It's a continent that has everything and anything the world needs. It's a continent that is the origin of humanity. Why is such a continent considered poor? We're giving over $500 billion to France every year because of the pre-existing treaties. We, the Africans, giving over $500 billion to France. This started between 1958 to 1961, during what they called the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. Even that pact is insulting They made the African leaders as we were, quote unquote, getting our independence. If you want your independence, you better sign this. You better sign the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. Agree to it or else. Well, two countries said, well, France, no, we are not signing. Pack your bags, go back to Europe. That was Guinea and Mali. The French said, oh, really? We're going to show you. History tells that the French went into those two countries, destroyed everything that they thought they had brought. They said they even took the last teaspoon out of those countries, proceeded to pour concrete into the sewage pipes, completely devastating the two economies. And that was to show the other Francophone countries that if you try to push back, this is the fate that's awaiting you. So needless to say, the other leaders went on and signed. The pact also said you will deposit 85% of your bank reserves with French Central Bank under the control of the French Minister of Finance. Should you need some of your own money, you have to submit your country's financial return report. And if approved, you can only access 20% of that money in any given year as a loan at commercial interest rates. They even went on to say all your major contracts, private and public, the French companies have the first right of refusal. That the French will have their military in your country and can invade you at any time without notice. That only the French can train your military. Do you think they'll train your military to be stronger than theirs? Only the French can sell you your equipment. Do you think they'll sell you equipment more powerful than theirs? That was 1958 to 61. To this day, that pact remains in place. And they want you to talk about corruption from the leaders in Africa. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but their own studies are saying 40 to 50 billion gets out of Africa from corruption. But France is taking over 500 billion. Over 500 billion by the time they finish investing it in the French stock market. They're realizing trillions of dollars. And if that money, the French countries may or may not know the return because the money is invested under the French name. And they only want you to talk about what is going on in Africa. And furthermore, they don't even tell you where that money is going. If it leaves Africa, where is it going? You see, corruption is a team sport. If you're going to talk about the players, we want all of them. Don't show us one side of the players, we want all of them. And surely at the center of it, we must have France. Because France is the biggest culprit. There are others who have never left. All the colonizers are still doing their silly little games in Africa, but France is leading the pack. I'm saying this to say, I need you all to understand your Africa. No country is without fault. No continent is without fault. We have our issues that we need to deal with as Africa. But while we are trying to deal with our own issues, the struggle would be just a little bit lighter if the 500 billion could stay on the continent. It would be a little bit easier to create jobs so our youth don't end up crossing the Mediterranean to go to Europe. It'll be easier for us to trade with each other if the boundaries were not there. We can't trade with each other because of different currencies. It's easier to exchange with the dollar and the euro than with each other's currencies. One, Dr. Kaberuka showed me a beautiful photo. There were women selling their wares, tomatoes, onions, and what have you on one side. And then about over there were another row of women. And she said, my sister, what do you see? I said, I see a road. She said, no, that's a border. You see, when the women on this side run out of tomatoes, they cannot buy the tomatoes they can see over on the other side because they need a visa. Thanks to Berlin Conference. This is how real Berlin Conference is. It affects our ability to trade with each other. It affects our ability to promote tourism. Try getting a visa to go to, say, Nigeria, Kenya, and Botswana. You gotta send your passport to Washington to get a visa. It might take you 3 weeks. The passport comes back. Then you gotta send the passport back to Washington to the Kenya embassy. Even though the Ghanaian embassy, the Nigerian embassy and the Kenyan embassy are less than a kilometer away from each other. That takes 3 weeks, your passport comes back. Then you take the same passport, send it back to Washington, to Botswana. By the time your passport comes back from Botswana, your visa from Nigeria is expired. Or goes back to Berlin Conference. They knew what they were doing. Just create chaos. They'll be running around like chicken without a head. Any which way they turn, there are roadblocks, and this time they're just playing those roadblocks on their own. That is our reality. So our Pan-African fathers back in 1963, realizing the only way to move forward as Africa, we gotta come together. They met and created what was then OAU. Fast forward, it's still work in progress. But all is not lost. Last year, the leaders came together and signed what is now called the African Continental Free Trade Area. For a change, we are going to be speaking with one voice. It's been a long journey. The 22 ratifications that were needed in order to begin implementation, 2 weeks ago, we received the 22nd ratification. So the implementation beginning summer this year, Africa is going to begin implementing the program of the children of Africa coming together, speaking with one voice. And we're counting on all of you, also realizing that we need to join hands and speak with one voice and realize that our anchor is in Africa and that we can no longer run away from our primary anchor, which is Africa. So we must come together. We must accept Africa as our mother. Mother Africa is calling on all of you. And it's important that you young people get it right. I hope you'll see it within you, dig deep down to come together and join hands, speaking with one voice as a united front of Mother Africa's children. I like to call ourselves as the beautiful, intelligent, sophisticated, highly adaptable, and totally indestructible children of Mother Africa. We can do this.
I was dozing off until she came to the stage. No, thank you, Ambassador Quao. All right, folks, as I said, it's been a long day. Some of you have not met our esteemed visitors, and so we're going to give you the opportunity going out there to enjoy some of the finger foods and hors d'oeuvres that we have. But I'd like to you to wait until our guests go out there, and then you all can follow. Before we do that, though, thank you very much, everybody, and let's meet out there.